Hey guys, this video is entirely optional. It is not necessary to view to proceed along with the Strange Man anthology, but it is very informational, and I thought you might like to hear the translation notes and theories from vgperson, which were released when the game came out for free in 2012. So, to date the recording, it's 2020, so it's an 8-year-old game, gone through quite a few updates. Officially released on Steam in 2019, which is the version that you saw me play. So I will be reading vgperson's translation notes and Uri's, Yuri, her account of what inspired the game. And I will link both in the description below if you have any interest in checking it out for yourself. I think I'll do these notes for every game because it is interesting. I know quite a few of you who like the thought process behind the creator. So without further ado, let's go into vgperson's translation notes and theories. What it's like translating a game into the language it was trying to be and what's probably going on it. Major spoilers present in both. Live place, blah blah blah. The game would like you to believe it was originally made in English and that the character's live place is America. As such, literally all images, except for the warning in the intro, were originally in English, all the names were English, etc. In some cases, Yuri did fine with this, but not so much in others. I'm waiting for you, the ending names, that school newspaper, the list goes on. However, never actually causes confusion or anything, and often adds charm, so I left the pictures and most other things like that alone. I guess it does mean I need a disclaimer that it's not strictly my translation to blame for those parts. Which means the lyrics for the rhyme in the intro were always English. However, a Japanese translation is used in the game proper, and I had to come up with the rhyming additional verse in Scene 4. Sink, under the bed, help me, I'm waiting for you, the text in the bar, and the daughter's hints all had Japanese translations in the message boxes. The pages of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde were unchanged. I considered blurring the text to simulate the okay, no way I have to read this feeling the Japanese players had, but I'm not some kid scared of the boogeyman, and you're as brave as Captain America were literal translations. Yuri is silly. The deal with the name D was always D/dreamer/his grade, but the D part, I imagine, was not intentional. The weird voice clips in Bad End 2 were obviously unchanged, but the text on the screen was in Japanese. So, me personally speaking, and I know in my stream I said I think this is new. I honestly do not remember from the playthrough that I had watched in the original version if there was voice acting or not. So, like I said at the time, I think it was new. Fluffy gave the reason for his name similarly in Japanese, but Fluffy like a towel used the word for time, fuwa fuwa. If I can stop one heart from breaking used a Japanese translation from the poem. I'm glad Yuri credited Emily Dickinson because I would not have recognized it otherwise. The family puzzle required no real changes on my part. I imagine it's a bit easier for English players as the English word family was never used in the Japanese version. What is sissy? The plot in the hotel revolves around the idea that David is, as Paul says in the prologue, a sissy for not being able to forget about Shirley. The original word for this was, please forgive my horrible butchering of the Japanese language, mimi shikute, which has the kanji for woman in it twice and basically means to be effeminate. Sissy's name was given in plain English via the scene name as Sissy, S-I-S-S-Y, the Japanese name being Shishi, so that made the sissy, wuss, etc. translation pretty evident. But having that be her name just seemed even weirder than D or Fluffy. Those two are just strange names, but sissy is, well, sort of an insult. Thus, I made it sissy with an I so that the intent was still clear, but the name was slightly less dumb. Plagiarism. It's a crime. Criminal Behavior, a Psychological Approach, is a real book. However, for who knows what reason, the game claims it's made by the made-up author Ivan Ebilitsev, so I figured I'd just keep it that way. In real life, it's by Kurt and Ann Bartol. I apologize to them on Yuri's behalf unless it was intentional for some bizarre reason. I mean, it is a pretty bizarre game. On a similar note, Professor Andrews' essay is copied directly from a random essay online. Well, geez, if he plagiarized papers, who cares what he thinks about D? The Magahin Man. I feel like the similarity of Magahin and Magata, crooked, was intentional. Just saying. Sure is weird for a game that's clearly in English, though. Miscellaneous goods. And lastly, just two silly things about the translation that come to mind. In Japanese, Paul told David that gloominess could grow mushrooms. That's an actual Japanese expression since jime means gloomy, but also damp. I changed this to you'll have your own personal rain cloud, since that's something that makes sense in English. Before the fight in the school, David says the monsters followed him who knows how many miles. But in Japanese, that was kilometers. Very American. It is America, given the George Wythe thing. Of course, later in the hospital, Yuri gets it right and has Fluffy and David measuring themselves in feet, so I guess they use feet and kilometers in Japan America. 3,280.84 is such an easier number to remember. So what does this game mean? Companions. The game doesn't give a very clear explanation on who or what Sissy, Dee, and Fluffy are, and I feel like that's somewhat intentional to allow player interpretation. I'm not super into Silent Hill theories, but I think you could consider them somewhat similar to the supporting characters in Silent Hill 2, only it's Duke rather than the main character. Sissy is a facet of Duke that represents how he couldn't get over his girlfriend leaving him. And, maybe he got pretty scared easily too. I don't know. D, which actually could have been Duke's nickname in school, is a facet that covers his failure to achieve his dreams, and how after long enough he starts feeling like, what's the point? Fluffy is a facet that relates to the sickness and death of his mother, including how he lost faith that she really loved him. We know now, with the new content, I don't know exactly when that new content was added, but I do know it was put into the Steam version, that these are actually all real people that existed, and again, if you've watched my videos, you heard my complete and utter shock. So it wasn't just the wiki, which is horribly outdated, actually. It wasn't just TV tropes. It was actually the notes from vgperson themselves that set this theory, just around the web. So that was something that Yuri put in later, explaining that Sissy was Duke's girlfriend, Dee was his friend, and Fluffy was representative of himself as a child. Myself, I think maybe Fluffy has brown hair while a young Duke had black hair. Maybe just because it's David kind of seeing himself. But I'll go back to the translation notes and talk about my own theories in a minute. Why Fluffy and not me? The game brings some attention to how the monster goes after Fluffy, specifically in the hospital, which confused me at first. I eventually realized, and Yuri confirmed on her blog, that it relates to the page about Duke wanting to kill his child self. This sentiment is also reflected in the cat whose kittens were killed before birth and the Crooked Man eating the embryo model. The fact that the Crooked Man pursues Duke's desires implies it's actually another facet of him, and unlike the other three, it does resemble him. Crooked. More clear than the role of the companions is that the Crooked Man represents depression, which drives the people he follows to suicide. What David observes about the rhyme is that the Crooked Man was surrounded by crooked things, which could relate to how depressed people see the world. In the hospital, we see that John Smith hung himself to escape the Crooked Man, and just as he was warned, the psychiatrist then followed suit and hung himself as well. When David is literally in the Crooked Man's clutches on the roof of the hospital, he says he is a crooked man and wants to shoot himself, consumed by his painful experiences. After conquering the monster at Duke's house, David says he'll continue to live through any sorrow, that he won't turn to suicide. And of course, as we see when David finds Duke in the attic, the Crooked Man actually resembles a hanged person. It's left rather unclear if there's just one Crooked Man spawned by Duke, or if anyone depressed like him is being followed by a similar monster. The John Smith/psychiatrist story makes it seem like there was a Crooked Man incident almost totally separate from Duke, so the latter seems more likely. David also mentions hearing the Crooked Man whisper when he was sad, implied to be before he even moved into the apartment, meaning he probably had his own. So the Crooked Man is actually open to a lot of interpretations. I know a lot of people are very hard set on it is Duke himself, and it could be a facet of Duke. I personally like to think that the Crooked Man is a supernatural being, and yes, that he does represent depression heavily, and but he is an entity that sort of takes the appearance of either his latest victim or the victim that is closely related to perhaps the person depressed. So in this case, it represents Duke because David and Duke, as Paul said, are very similar in consciousness. That's my theory, though, and it doesn't mean jack. Nothing has been confirmed or denied about the Crooked Man, so you all can think about you all can think what you want to about the Crooked Man. Totally up to you. Help me. It seems that Sissy and Dee are. It seems that telling Sissy and Dee the right options helps David and or Duke with their depression, though ultimately it doesn't keep the latter from committing suicide. From the second playthrough ending, while trying to console Duke, I realized the things I said to him were what I wanted someone to have said to me. While this could refer to what David's saying to Duke in that conversation, this may mean he was indirectly consoling Duke through the companions. Don't end up like Duke. In many respects, including those which the companions represent, David was like Duke. The game makes that extremely clear, so I won't bother going into the similarities. Since David looked to be headed for suicide, Duke tried to help David. At least we might assume that was his intent. There's one somewhat out-of-place book in the area, which the code of the game actually describes as hint books. The book in the hotel discusses how they, monsters like the Crooked Man, go after the soft-hearted so as to drive them to suicide. The book in the school discusses how someone could both hate and like another. See also the inconsistent message in the bar. Duke doesn't like David because of his similarity, but helps David so he won't end up the same way. The book in the hospital, the Emily Dickinson poem, is extremely fitting. Helping David so that his life is not in vain is a perfect description of Duke's desire. Birdie couldn't fly. While the bad endings on the rooftop are pretty straightforward, the first two bad endings are a lot more abstract in their consequences. In the first one, telling Sissy she should stop crying about it seems to do nothing to help Duke and or David's depression, which could be why the Crooked Man kills them both. The second is similar. Telling Dee to keep trying doesn't help matters at all. The Crooked Man thus says it was David who killed Dee and himself because he couldn't help either of them. vgperson posted this on March 17th, 2013. So, over 7 years ago. Again, not to date this. So, on to Yuri's message. vgperson translated this. And left it on their page. I followed them both on Twitter, and they're both very sweet people, by the way. So it's a good way just to keep up with what vgperson does and what Yuri's thinking of doing next. So here is what inspired the Crooked Man, and it is pretty chilling. Sort of scary stories that really happened from Yuri's blog. A bit about my motivation for creating the Crooked Man, as mentioned in the extras in-game. I said it was based on a personal experience, but it wasn't my own. It was my brother's. Note, due to the similarities of the story to the game, there are spoilers for the Crooked Man. Be warned. My brother looks like a tough guy on the outside, but he's really a coward who's easy to influence. He also has good manners and is kind at heart, so the people around him are fond of him. Though, as his little sister, I got bossed around a lot. So this brother of mine loves to travel. He started a travel club in college and drove all over the place with his friends. Then on one of his trips, something strange happened. My brother had gone on a road trip with a few friends to a place in the Northeast. They checked in at the place they were staying, got dinner, and drank a lot afterwards. But my brother was the driver, so he didn't drink. Then suddenly, in the middle of their get-together, one of the girls spoke up with, "I think something's going to come out." This girl always claimed to see things, and no one could ever tell if she was always being serious or making it up. But, at any rate, my brother got the feeling the girl was really scared. Also, despite being a coward, my brother does have a great interest in the occult. He watched that whole video of "It Really Happened" cursed videos, but was too scared to watch them alone, so he always needed me to hold on to, and sometimes drives out with a friend to spiritual sites. He's not bright. Anyway, he had kind of a bad feeling about this. Apparently, it was just him and the girl who felt this way, but he decided to cut the party short to get everyone get up early the next day. Everyone went to their futons, and some time passed. My brother had been driving for a long time, so he was quickly overcome with drowsiness and was half asleep. Just as he was about to fully fall asleep, it happened. Something cold and hand-like grabbed his ankle in the futon. He was surprised, yelped, and jumped out. It was loud enough to wake up his sleeping friends, so I imagine it was quite a scream. When asked what had happened, he replied something seriously grabbed my leg, but they thought that he was drunk, even though he hadn't been drinking. Unsatisfied and swept over with fear, he managed to get back to sleep. But from the day after on, my brother was attacked by many unlucky things. First, on the way back from his trip, there was a 3-car pileup in front of him. Apparently, he hit the brakes just far enough away that he only lightly hit the car in front, but had he been a moment too slow, he would have flown into the window and gotten badly injured. In addition, my brother was present for 3 suicides. He bore witness to a suicide jumper and someone jumping in front of a train. His nerves were apparently fairly wrecked, seeing brain spilled out on the ground. He also had a relapse of hives. He was last tormented by it in middle school due to stress from clubs and studying, but it came back yet again. Before, it had been due to stress, but nothing was particularly stressing him this time, so he thought it odd. Deep inside, I wondered if something strange, read in an occulty voice, was following him and applying an unseen pressure, but I was silent. Then, there was an event that critically wounded my brother. The day of that massive quake in East Japan, it became clear my brother would have to repeat that year of school. This was especially a problem considering he had a tentative job offer ready after graduation, and now it seemed lost. It was quite a shock for him. I was job hunting at the time, so even I came to think, oh, my poor brother. So did our mom, and she gave my brother this advice. With all the bad things happening lately, maybe you should talk to T. I'll explain who T is. Calling him that might come off as a joke, but it seems like a fitting name, though he's not actually a T at all. T is the son of a chief Buddhist priest, and he's been friends with my brother since kindergarten. He's tall, kind, and gets asked favors by a lot of people. My brother has a ton of faith in T, and he would always talk with him if anything bad or worrying came up. According to T, my brother was easily haunted, and would periodically be followed by something or another. Usually it was minor stuff, so they would go away without T having to do anything. But while being haunted, bad things would happen and he would be overly anxious. At any rate, T cordially listens to any trivial worry. He truly is like the Buddha. Oh, and according to T, his sister, that's me, is one of a rare few with such good fortune as to not have many hardships in life. Well, maybe. So, as Mom had advised, my brother decided to explain the situation to T. First, he got out his cell phone to make an appointment. At the time, T was already carrying out a memorial service in the sick chief's priest's stead. I happened to be present at the time, and strangely, the phone call lasted mere seconds. I asked what was up. My brother looked uneasy and said that while he hadn't explained anything, he'd been told to come to the temple immediately. I decided to refrain from saying things like, "Wonder if T's mad," and instead told him that he's in a bad situation and better get to that temple. This was sometime past 10 p.m. My brother came back at 2 a.m. He looked very excited. When I asked him for info, it went like this. When he arrived at the temple, T was waiting for him, having his usual rough appearance in battle gear, aka his stole. T said to come in, and my brother was led into the main hall without either of them explaining anything. T sat him in the center of a large mat, and my brother was wondering what was going on. Beside him, T began some kind of ceremony. T swung papers with drawings on them, circling around him, chanting what seemed to be sutras. My brother was taken aback, wondering what the hell he was doing. Soon, something strange began to happen. He suddenly got very sad. He couldn't resist the urge to cry. He told me he was still confused and kept his eyes tightly shut to keep the tears from overflowing. He wasn't sure how much time had passed, but he noticed T sitting in front of him asking if he was okay. Still dumbfounded, T said, "You went to blank in the Northeast, didn't you?" My brother was surprised, since T shouldn't have known he went on a trip there. He asked what on earth was going on. This is what T told him. "The moment I heard your voice on the phone, I perceived you were being haunted again. And unlike prior cases, it's very clearly stuck to you and refuses to let go. So I called you to the temple to do an exorcism. But once I had you here in front of me, I found it was a spirit with a will too strong to exorcise. I tried to do an exorcism still, but that only got it halfway. You're being haunted by a dead girl from the place you took a trip to. She was from a time not too long ago, when literacy was high even among common people. But she couldn't read. She couldn't go to school either, and she couldn't really spend time with girls like herself. She just wanted to have fun with girls her age. But her wish was never granted, and she died. She was buried, but she still lived. She died in the earth, sad, bitter, wondering why her. Her hatred must have remained in that place. Seeing you and your friends on that trip, she wanted to be with you, because she couldn't do that in life. You seemed the kindest of them, someone who would show sympathy, so she picked you. She didn't mean to do anything bad to you, but she wanted to use your sympathy to bring you to her side. Thus, many unlucky things happened to you. During the exorcism, when you wanted to cry, you unconsciously sympathized with her, and thus became very sad. I said the exorcism only went halfway, yes? That's not because she refuses to leave you, but rather because you unconsciously accept her. To fully expel her, you must hold a memorial service for her. You must take care of your own sympathy. Go to blank once more. There's an untended grave near the inn there. I'm unsure exactly where it may be, so tell the people at the inn the situation and offer flowers somewhere near the inn. And bring not only flowers, but something that will please the girl. Go as soon as you can. Still excited, my brother told me he was going to blank right now. Mom hurriedly wrapped some flowers in her room and gave them to my brother. Then she handed some candy we had around the house, because she figured a girl would like to have candy. Mom was crying. She said she felt so sorry for the girl, given she was around the same age as her son and died full of regret. I also gave him some special salad flavor jagarico. My brother came back home after about a day. He drove to blank and went to the hotel where he'd stayed for his trip. He told his story honestly to the innkeepers, and they were surprisingly believing. They said that there was a huge field behind the inn which could easily have an untended grave, so they thought it would be the best to make the offering there. My brother offered the flowers and candy there and joined hands together. With his eyes shut and hands held, he felt mysteriously happy and soon started crying. Since then, sinister things stopped happening around my brother. He was able to get hired by the company that was going to tentatively hire him, and he's now a working adult. The hives also calmed down, and he happily goes to work, though he does mutter some nonsense about wanting a girlfriend. The majority of you were probably wondering what this has to do with the Crooked Man. Well, at first I wanted to make this story into a game directly, but thinking of the girl who had died, I wondered if making a game out of it would really be the best idea. So I took the most interesting parts of the experience. I focused on the idea of being haunted due to an unconscious sympathy to make a completely different story for a game. I had also wanted to use the idea of going to meet someone calling me already, so I combined it with that to make Crooked Man. To be honest, I have a negative view of straight up putting ghosts and stuff in games, by which I mean if you can see them plainly, they're not scary. That's why I wanted to make Insanity about madness, that was Yuri's first game, and was not translated until recently, and Paranoiac, which has been remade, about the worry of whether you're normal or not. But hearing my brother's experience, I've come to realize that whether you see it or not, what exists, exists. I now think the point is in how it affects you and not how you respond to it. How you respond to it, excuse me. So though the Crooked Man keeps appearing and attacking, David keeps resisting as well. Perhaps the scariness goes away, but I guess that's just life. And that was the impetus for creating the Crooked Man. Thank you very much for reading. So those are some behind-the-scenes information on Crooked Man, both from the translator and from the creator themselves. Again, the links will be down below. It goes straight to vgperson's it goes straight to vgperson's website. They don't just translate things by Yuri, but Yuri has made quite a few games that are not on Steam. Only the Strange Man Anthology is on Steam. Games like Mermaid Swamp, Insanity, Paranoiac, those have been updated actually, but they are still downloadable for free. They are all PC exclusive. So, yeah, I will be continuing with the Sandman, and I will do any translation notes or anything from Yuri. I'll be reading this. So I'll do this sort of video for pretty much every entry in the series, if there is one. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this little bit of info dump, and I'll see you guys later with starting to play the Sandman. Keep an eye out on my Facebook page, mainly my Facebook page, although my Twitter as well, at Chaos Arcanum. My Facebook page is Val's Video Game Valhalla, the same as my Twitch. So keep an eye out there. Things are starting to come together a little bit. And yeah, we'll see how it goes from here. Have a good one, guys.